Picking the right country for ecotourism, why not pick Denmark? Well, we're going to be discussing that in today's episode on Travel Talk with Martin. If you're aiming for an eco-friendly travel, Denmark might have popped up in your search once or twice, and there are actually some good reasons for that. First of all, Denmark aims to be carbon neutral by 2050. Well, that's just around the corner, and by 2030 they aim to have reduced their emissions by 70% if you compare it to 2018 standards. But of course, as politics goes, this goes forth and back and forth and back and forth and back. And that is just politics. But those are the big numbers that are almost set entirely in stone. But we also adopt quite a weird way of doing it, because we're also waiting for the technology to get there. So what? Yeah. Our goals is based on future technologies that hasn't been invented yet. But there are some great initiatives we will be talking about in this episode that is actually moving the right way. And with the goal of being carbon neutral in 2050, the Danish industrial sector has moved more in the way of developing and producing green solutions. And well, that's a great thing. We are promoting this great innovative culture, and we are innovating in the green space quite a lot, and I will be covering some of it in this episode, so stay tuned. But how far has Denmark come so far? Well, most of our power is actually produced by windmills, and we do look into initiatives of using all the water there is in Denmark, because Denmark is mostly islands. We have over 400 islands in Denmark. We are also looking into developing a greater bicycle road system outside of the big cities. Yeah, when you're out in the countryside, you will find great bicycle roads. I'll return to that. But basically, we can divide it into two things when we talk eco-tourism. We can talk the tourist, the one who is here on that green vacation. Hopefully, you did not fly here. And then we can talk about the ones who live here and is eco-friendly living. And you cannot set them apart, because you need to have eco-friendly living to have eco-friendly travels. And then we look into the future of what challenges lies ahead for an eco-friendly, sustainable travel industry in Denmark, but we will get back to that. And throughout this episode, if you in any ways get some questions, write it in the comments. If you are listening in on a platform that doesn't have comments, well, you can find me on my social media. I will link it in the description, and you can ask me the questions there. I love to answer all your questions. And hopefully I can make it into another whole episode about your questions, so you can get a proper in-depth answer. But if it's a yes or no question, I cannot go in depth. Of course, I cannot do that. Let's start by diving down into ecotourism in Denmark. And how do you get to Denmark? Well, you take the train. Denmark is well connected to the surrounding world by train. We have great train connections to Sweden. Thanks to our bridge, we have them all the way up to Stockholm. And it is almost faster than flying to take the train between Copenhagen and Stockholm, if you calculate in the time it takes to get into the airport through security and onto the plane, and before it takes off and when it lands, until you get your baggage. And well, you get from central city to central city. Yeah, so from Stockholm it's almost faster to take the train. From the rest of Europe, it's not faster to take the train, but it is more eco-friendly than flying. That much I hope we can agree on by now. And Denmark offers a wide variety of eco-friendly travel options. There are biking around in Denmark. We have these great bicycle roads. They are most of the time next to the big roads, but they're separated not only by a curb, but also by a stretch of, well, green grass. So you are separated entirely from traffic. That gives safety and security to the one on the bicycle. And in Denmark we also have great hiking routes. There are over 1,000 separate hiking routes all throughout Denmark, and that's the major routes. I have found a map that will highlight over 100,000 different routes you can walk in Denmark. So there are plenty of walking routes, and there are even walking tours through Denmark. We also have the pilgrim routes, which actually is a great route. I love to walk it at some point. It starts from Helsingør, it goes all the way down to, I believe it's Lolland. I have not tried walking that way. And then from Copenhagen, it goes over and it hits over at Kolding. So it's all through Sealand, all through Fyn, which is a small little island in the center of Denmark. And then we hit in Jutland. In Jutland, you can go from north to south and ending up down in Germany. So there are this big major walking highway, can we call it. It is not that you will find thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people walking, but it should be quite a beautiful route, and the parts of it I have walked is so beautiful, so I do recommend that you actually go out and explore that route if you are into hiking. We also have on the island of Møn, we have the Camino, and the Camino is not like the Camino. No, it's a walking route, it's a several days walking route, and it's a great walking route in one of the most beautiful parts of Danish nature. And I'm saying this with a little, I'm careful not to say too much, because I know some other people will say, oh, it's not there, there's the most beautiful part. We also up in northern Zealand have a UNESCO World Heritage Sites. As well as in Jutland, we have several UNESCO World Heritage Sites. One of them is the Warden Sea, and I do recommend that you also visit that one. So Denmark has a lot of these nature-preserved, beautiful UNESCO World Heritage Sites that you should visit while you're in Denmark, at least if you're here for the eco-tourism. Another way of traveling around Denmark is by boat, sailing boat. Yeah, I do recommend sailing boat if you are the most eco-friendly, because it's nice, it's comfortable, it's relaxing, and there's nothing better than listening to the wind hitting the sail and the waves hitting the side of the boat. Yeah, by the way, I am a sailor by heart, so I love to sail the ships. And Denmark has over 400 islands to visit. Some of them are private islands, but we have over 400 islands, so I'm sure that you can find an island or two to go ashore and look at the beautiful sights. So you can also sail around in Denmark. We also have canals, there's not that many of them. Most of it is in open sea because it's a small island nation. We even have a peninsula. Jutland is a peninsula, but you can sail all around it and you can sail through it, and there's plenty of great places to sail. And if you're into canoeing, we have plenty of small streams that you can sail into. It is not like sailing in other countries where you have to get up, walk a lot, get down, and then sit in it, because there are all sorts of streams and downfalls. In Denmark, it is mostly flat, so it's not that we have so many downfalls. When you have to walk, it's mostly because there's an obstruction for the canoe. And it is not that often there's that. And of course, if you're here as a tourist, you will need some eco-friendly ways of living, and there are plenty of options for that. Through booking.com, I actually find one of the most sustainable hotels, and there are several sustainable hotels. There are these small sustainable hotels. It is also the bigger hotels are sustainable, because much of what we do in Denmark are sustainable. We have mostly sustainable energy. We have mostly trash sorting, and we try to minimize how we pack our products as much as possible. And the government takes initiatives to, well, make it more eco-friendly. So, of course, there are even more eco-friendly ways of living when you're in Denmark. There are camping spots with staff where you are safe, secure, and within a fence, and there is great hostels. Most hostels are actually eco-friendly and are made to maximize accommodation in a great way, and you can make your own food. There's also hotels that, well, price themselves of their sustainability. So you have several different options, and if you want me to go more in depth with that, hit me up on any of my social media or on the YouTube account, and I will of course go more in depth with what sustainable accommodations can you find in Copenhagen. Or in Denmark, in fact, because I like to broaden it out to more than just Copenhagen, because most of the eco-friendly things you would like to see are outside of Copenhagen. And before we move to the green living of Denmark, let's just go over some great sustainable practices while you're a tourist in another country. One of them is to reduce waste. You can do that in many ways. Some of the ways I actually do it is not eating as much out. I don't go to eat at McDonald's or Burger King. I usually take along a sandwich or two, and I have these small plastic containers with me. I can throw the sandwich down in. I can just wash them when I get back to the hostel. Most of the time I use a hostel when I'm really traveling eco-friendly. I do also travel other ways because I like to explore different ways of travel. There's also conserving water, and in Denmark, when you're sweaty because you walked a long way, there's several ways of conserving water. Short bath, one of them. But you can also, if you're in Copenhagen, for example, and you would like to spend a lot of time in the water, you can go into the harbor bath and you can take a dip, or along the beaches take a dip, and when you go back to the hotel, take a quick shower, and then you are as clean as can be. When you're out walking the different walking routes, you can jump into the water. That's a way of conserving water, and you can actually wash yourself, well, basic washing of yourself out in the sea. Of course, you will have salt on you. So I do recommend that you do it in a place where you can just go up afterwards and just take a quick shower to just wash away the salt. And that's mostly for your skin. Skin irritation can come from bathing too much in salt water. You actually need that fresh water bathing. And then there are throwing out waste in nature, because I'm seeing several new places pop up that has biodegradable kitchenware, biodegradable plates and knife and fork, which means they are made out of wood and not plastic. There is no sort of plastics in it. It's pure wood. And you can actually throw them in nature and nothing comes of it. And I like this initiative, something you can throw in nature, and it actually promotes better nature by throwing it out in nature than throwing it in the garbage can. And as soon as I find a great solution, I will of course show you how it functions and how it can benefit you as a tourist. But what makes Denmark so special for ecotourism? Well, for that we have to look into how the Danes' eco-friendly living is. Yeah. And why do we do that? Well, because eco-friendly living rubs off on eco-friendly tourists, and then we have the eco-friendly tourist coming to the place where they live eco-friendly. Those two things are combined and they belong together. You cannot have one without the other. And first part of it is actually the energy levels, because 50% of the Danish energy are delivered by windmills. We have a lot of shoreline, so we have a lot of windmills. At some points, at peak points, we have 100% delivery by windmills, and we're even selling our very cheap energy to the surrounding nations because we have too much wind power. At other points, we have to buy in from other nations because then we have too little wind. We are very dependent on wind when it comes to how green our grid is. And that is also why there is being produced many solar panel farms, because the solar panel farms will then add to the grid, and it might not be as much power they can produce as the windmill per square inch, but at least on a sunny, windless day, they can take over some of the energy production. Besides that, a big group of Danes travel by train every day, thereby reducing emissions, and they use public transport, because there's nothing wrong with emissions to a point. Of course, we shall reduce them as much as possible. But if you take a bus, if you fill up a bus, it doesn't produce the same amount of emission per people in it as the same amount of cars. If all people were to drive 4 in each car, they will still produce more emissions from the cars. So the more people who takes public transport, the better. But you don't get into overcrowded public transport most of the time. You get into a reasonably crowded public transport most of the time in Copenhagen. And outside of Copenhagen, well, we are still needing to go a bit further for people to use public transport, but it's a whole other discussion. But basically, you can travel almost all over Denmark with public transport. There are so few places that is impossible or impractical to use public transport to. And I will show you that in some of the episodes on my YouTube channel. And if you look at something like Copenhagen, it has been recognized as one of the most bicycle-friendly capitals in the world, up there alongside of Amsterdam. The big difference between Amsterdam and Copenhagen is, well, if you look in a broader perspective and something you can adapt to other countries, well, Amsterdam is the number one spot. It is really the top of bicycle friendliness. Copenhagen, it is the top of attainable bicycle friendliness for most big cities around the world. And that is the entire aim of Copenhagen bicycle friendliness, is that slowly take out the car. And we're not taking out the car totally, but we are getting more and more streets where cars are not allowed, or we have limited cars to only inhabitants and products that needs to be transported to the stores, and thereby taking further and further steps for making Copenhagen more bicycle friendly. And the people of Denmark are great at recycling. We have of course started several years ago, but we are up to 46% of all waste are recycled, and it is still growing, that number. This number is an old number from 2021. I haven't found the latest updated numbers, but 46%, and it has only grown since then. I remember an article, but I could not find it, so I will not say it is this, where it says that we were up towards 55 to 60% of all waste are recycled, but don't pin me on it. I know it's at least 46 because those are the old public accessible numbers. And then there are the 2050 goal of being free of fossil fuel and have more sustainable transport and all green energy. Well, if we reach it, I don't know, but it's only in 27 years. And we have come very far these last couple of years. Corona actually put that very much forward because people then had time to develop new methods of using sustainable power, sustainable travel, sustainable home improvements. So we have reached quite far in this regard, and if we manage to reach the goal of, well, being fossil fuel free at 2050, it is going to be a great step. And for that, I will just highlight Christiania. They're almost fossil fuel free. And well, you should watch my episode on YouTube where I visit Christiania. It's part of a bigger episode, but Christiania is such a special place because it is very eco-friendly and one of the most eco-friendly zones in Denmark. I just want to highlight it because if you are here for eco-friendliness, visit Christiania. It is in the heart of Copenhagen and it is certainly worth a visit. And though Denmark has come far, there are still problems ahead. Yeah, because there are big obstructions to getting the last of this fossil fuel out of Denmark and the last of this unsustainable way of traveling, unsustainable way of getting energy, getting that out of the way, because it's always the last mile that's the hardest. We start off great. Everybody can start off great, and we can reach very high without using a lot of energy on it. But it is last mile. It is just as when you are bicycling, the last mile to your destination is the hardest because you are the most tired and you have used the most energy on it, and you have to get out the last energy. It's the same principle, just in another context. And the big factors in this are agricultural, because they need to produce food. We need that food. They can do only so much in a sustainable way currently. For example, pig farming or cow farming, that produces a lot of methane gas because, the animal produce a lot of methane gas, but also the machines produce a lot of CO2, which is also damaging for the environment. So there's something there we have to look into. And then someone might say, oh, but you can just go vegan, but not everybody is into vegan. I like much vegan food, but I also like my steak. I usually buy my steaks and my meat from a sustainable farm in my local area. But that doesn't mean I am going all vegan if I cannot get it. That just means I have to look more into animal well-being and all these kind of things, because you cannot buy entirely sustainable meat in Denmark yet. But you can buy more sustainable meat or less sustainable meat. You can buy more animal-friendly meat or less animal-friendly meat. And as long as you go for the more and more and more within your budget, you're doing what you can. And I'm not pointing fingers at vegans and saying, oh, you are bad because you're vegan. I'm not pointing fingers at meat eaters, oh, you're bad because you eat meat. I'm just saying look in for the best way of treating the animal if you are going to eat meat. That's what I do. And then there are the challenge of some technologies hasn't been invented yet to get rid of some of the last parts of unsustainable energy. For example, we use coal power plants as a backup, and we have no real backup if we are not to use those coal power plants. Oh, but then you can use hydrogen plants, yes, but we need to use energy to produce hydrogen. Oh, but then you can, yeah, we have looked into that. We have looked into many of the ideas you come up with. So it is more difficult than you actually think. I have talked with many politicians, I've talked with many scientists, I've talked with many people about this because I want to find and say, all right, in this episode I can just say, we just have to switch to, no, it's not that simple. It's seriously not that simple. And that is also a difficulty when it comes to producing sustainable energy, and so make things sustainable is not as easy as you think. And that is why we in Denmark, to combat this problem, are continuing to invest in the development and in the sciences that should develop the technology we need for the last mile. And that leaves us with, though Denmark have come far in this regard, we are not there yet. But it is one of the most sustainable countries in the world. I'm not saying it's the most, because depending on when you look at it, we can be number 1 or number 5. But we are amongst the top sustainable countries in the world. And that is why you should go on your eco-friendly travel to Denmark. And please use the train or the boats, sailing boats when you get here, or any form of public transport. Please don't come in cars. And why? Because it's not eco-friendly. Yeah, I'm an eco-warrior to a degree, because I will use a car if I need to. But when I go on vacation, I like to take trains, and I've even made a podcast episode or video podcast, depending on which platform you are. And I will link to the video podcast episode in the description for the benefits of taking the train, why you should take the train. And it's actually quite interesting to take the train, and I love to take the train. It gives me so many other options. And just to shoot down some of the things you might hear. Some of your friends might say to you, oh, but you're only one person, what can you do? But if one person goes more sustainable, it affects the whole, it's part of the whole, so it affects the whole, and the entire whole moves a little more sustainable. If 10 people does it, we move a little more sustainability. If 100,000 people more do it, then we start to make an impact. And by you showing it is easy, it is great, and you can actually do it quite simple, you start to push others, and then we have the snowball effect. So show the world that eco-friendly travel is possible by traveling to Denmark by an eco-friendly way, and show the world that eco-friendly travel and sustainable travel is actually the road forth for great experiences.